Hi, so I'm going to talk a little bit about inflation because it's a big mush pot. Nobody really knows what's going on. Everybody has their own opinion, but besides for the Federal Reserve and some very sophisticated hedge funds and stuff, nobody really is looking at financial models. Even those models are based off of inputs that so-called experts have. I mean, they're probably smarter than the average person, but still, nobody knows every single factor in the economy. That said, nothing's random. Everything has a reason, but to predict it is ridiculously hard. So that's the introduction. So gas, the gas for cars, got really expensive. Still is very expensive, but it's off of its high in from July. That's probably because of demand destruction, and I saw an article explaining that why hasn't it happened earlier? Because people were strapped into their own schedules. So basically, the demand destruction couldn't have happened within 6 months. So only after those prior reservations could the actual demand for gas slow down. There's that. I mean, there's more factors into gas about the processing, crude, and drilling, and where they're getting it from, and geopolitical issues like the Russia, Ukraine, all that stuff, which I'm not going into. Then there's the rest of the inflation. I mean, gas affects everything because diesel affects cargo, freight, and shipping and everything. And there's also petrochemicals, which affects plastics and things that are manufactured from there. Um, but in general, where did it come from? Before the oil, for gas inflation, there's inflation besides for the supply chain inflation. The supply side part is gas and regulations, but there's the demand side, which is all the stimulus. Um, which means, and I'm not arguing for or against. Um, I have my own opinions, but I'm not arguing for or against any of the stimulus packages. But every single one from what I think was in March or May 2020 with Trump in Trump's own two, even Trump's own packages, which Republicans want to argue were so-called necessary. I mean, I have my own opinions on that, but even those two were already inflationary. I mean, theoretically, if all Americans had let's say a $3,000, $5,000 savings account, then nobody would have to. There wouldn't be no need for any of the government money at all in COVID. I mean, maybe people could have been on furlough instead of being fired because there's job elasticity problems with the unions and stuff and like pilots. But that means getting hired and fired is not really so possible in certain industries. But nevertheless, the inflation didn't ha- it was started from every single one of these bills. Every single time the government spends more than it makes, it doesn't really necessarily matter whether that China is buying the debt or the Federal Reserve is buying the debt or U.S. banks are buying the debt. Debt is inflationary. Just how it happens that when you're borrowing from a different country, then it affects currency exchange and stuff, which is because it gets even more complicated. Um, and then you start to argue about then you can start to discuss whether the strong dollar or weak dollar is better. But that's not the point. I'm talking about inflation here. So every single time the government spends on deficit, it affects inflation. The question is, how long does it take inflation to set in, to circle around the economy? And I mean, just when government just puts out a bill spending a lot of money, it doesn't affect everyone automatically. Once people start spending it, this is an elementary idea of how inflation works. So it takes a long time. So we could still be the inflation we're seeing now. Besides the supply side of gas and supply chain issues of COVID shutdowns, besides that, the demand side, we could still be only on the. I mean, I'm not a modeler. We could, I don't know, I could be wrong. We could still be suffering from Trump's stimulus packages. We couldn't even be on yet to the dollars pumped in from Biden. I mean, and I'm not even talking about when the Fed did started QE when the rates are up and down. I'm just talking about fiscal policy from the government. The Fed is just the enabler. The actual the actual dollars are coming from. I mean, actually, QE is open market. So if the Fed buys up mortgages, that it's inflationary also. But if the Fed is buying up government debt, that's enabling government to borrow on lower interest rates, basically. So I didn't really explain like metrics too much. I just explained factors because nobody really knows how to measure each one against the other and know what's happening when. I'm just trying to give you a more of a different perspective to sort of deconstruct inflation and see where it's coming from and give you an idea of how much weight maybe to consider each one has in the story.